fine.
Shall I just crack on?
Yeah, if you can share your screen there.
Fine. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to turn my video off because it distracts me, but I'm still here, hopefully. Where are we? Okay. I'm assuming you can see this. So I've been asked to talk about this for a bit. I should say it's very difficult to even scratch the surface of this subject in 15 minutes. I might eat into the Q&A time a little bit, but I'll try and do my best on that. But I teach on this subject quite a lot, and I spend days talking about it. It's a complicated area, but I'm going to try and just show you a few slides outlining some general principles, and then show you a quick example of a moisture risk assessment, which is what kind of led to this in the first place, to make it a bit more practical. So this is me. I run an independent sustainable energy consultancy. I do new build stuff, but pretty much all my work is retrofits, really, and most of that's traditional and historic buildings. I'm involved in various other working groups and organisations, and I've got this, that, and the other qualification. I do quite a lot of teaching on this stuff, but that's me. That's not very interesting. So this is the sort of thing we're trying to avoid when we're thinking about internal wall insulation. This sort of thing we're also trying to avoid. This wall that you're looking at here has not been retrofitted, but it's going to be. And these sort of embedded timbers are one of the key risk areas. That's the sort of thing that can happen behind your insulation if you don't do it properly. This is probably the most important slide. Do you understand what you're doing? If you understand what you're doing, then you're halfway there. If at any point you're not sure, just stop and think. There are lots of resources and advice out there. This is very important as well. Solid wall insulation, internal in particular, is not a just do that measure. It's part of a whole house process. This is a buzzword, a buzz phrase that you'll have heard a lot in recent years. It's also quoted in this British Standard document, which is really significant. If you work in this area, you should have a copy of it, I would definitely say. And there are 4 really useful principles that they use to describe the whole building approach. So if you remember these words about understanding context, ensure your coherence in detailing, building some capacity and caution, then again, you're halfway there. There are an awful lot of contextual elements to think about. I don't need to talk through all these, but you need to understand what else needs doing to the building, where are the defects, what's your air tightness and ventilation, heating strategies, are there any heritage concerns, any targets you're trying to meet, what sort of modelling are you doing and how good is it? How robust are building control guidance and what's your building control officer like? How understanding are they of the need to address traditional building fabric properly? Have you got a decent survey? Are you addressing all the technical details? Are you using the right materials? Are you addressing moisture properly? This is where nearly all the technical risk is, and it's where a lot of my work sits at the moment. Overheating, particular risk with internal insulation, depending on how it's done, and particularly the way the climate's going. What else needs doing to enable the internal insulation? What are your occupancy levels like? Where's the budget? How are you going to make sure that the building, as retrofitted, is good not just today and tomorrow, but in 50 years' time? You know we're going to get more pressure on buildings for all sorts of reasons. So it's a long-term view. Specifically for internal insulation, there are a small number of particular areas of concern that can affect risk profiles. So we're talking about building condition, both now and in the future when the building's retrofitted. We're talking about how you're going to manage internal water vapor and external rainwater. Is the masonry exposed, or is it rendered? Is it lime render or cement render? Is the render knackered? Have you got holes in your pointing? You're going to make your walls colder, potentially making it harder for them to dry out. So how are you going to manage that? What are you doing about embedded timber and metal elements? Can you address thermal bridges? What's your air tightness strategy? And are you mitigating against overheating risks? Risks are very project specific. They really depend on where you are, what direction you're facing, what materials you're using, whether the building's in good nick, what type of insulation and how much you're using, how well it's designed and installed, and so on and so on. And every building is different. So what you've done on one building might not be what you can do to a neighbouring building. This is a project I worked on a while ago, which has 5 different wall types. Grade 2 listed building down near Cambridge, in Cambridge. It's been retrofitted, but I wrote a retrofit strategy and did some moisture modelling for them, and they need at least 3 or 4 different internal insulation strategies because of the different wall types. Moisture, I've said already, it's where most of the technical risk is at. It's really important to understand this and have a decent moisture risk assessment. There's a basic internal insulation assembly, so moisture could get into this via vapor diffusion, depending on the materials, moist airflow if you've got gaps in your insulation layer. You can have liquid water entering the wall by capillary action from the ground and from the walls. You can have gravity and liquid diffusion through open joints, and then you have this not very user-friendly term, solar-driven vapor diffusion, or sometimes called reverse condensation, really describing a phenomenon that can occur in, let's say, typical spring weather, where you get driving rain on a masonry wall and then the sun comes out. Some of that water, which is absorbed into the masonry, will evaporate to the outside, but depending on context, some of it can be driven further into the wall, and on occasion it can go all the way through to the insulation. So if you have an impermeable insulation layer on the inside, that has nowhere to go, and that's potentially bad news. So you need a moisture risk assessment that looks at all of this. And until quite recently, we have tended to use a very simplified moisture risk assessment that only looks at internal vapor and ignores all of this, and it's not appropriate for masonry walls in any way, which is why some of you will have heard of things like WUFI, which provide a much more detailed assessment. I'll show you an example in a few minutes. That also explains the move towards more natural, generally, but not always, moisture open materials that can allow moisture to diffuse through them in various ways. A lot of rigid systems and a lot of wet systems emerging and becoming more popular. These are various quotes from good practice guidance. They're just different ways of saying if you've got traditional masonry wall, you should be using moisture open insulation, and all good practice guidance for traditional buildings will advocate this. What you're trying to do is minimize your technical risk. So a lot of systems will use board-based materials like wood fiber here. It's probably the most commonly used. But there's much more interest and use of things like insulating lime plaster. That's a building in the North York Moors, and this is a barn conversion in the Dales, both of which I've worked on. This is really good in a lot of ways. It's not a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet for internal insulation, but I see this being used a lot more for various reasons, which I don't have time to go into now. But as a baseline, it's important to understand that you're not just thinking about thermal performance with materials. They have an awful lot of roles to fulfill, not least technical risk management and looking after the building fabric and occupants inside the building. And when you've thought about materials, you need to think about how much to put on. And again, there are lots of quotes here generally suggesting there's more research and guidance highlighting the fact that doing a bit, but doing it properly and paying attention to the details is probably going to be more effective and lower technical risk than trying to get the lowest possible U value. So what else? There's loads more I could talk through, but I don't have time. So I wrote a very, very quick possible process. This is the sort of approach that I tend to take on the projects I work on. So you look at the building, you get a good understanding of it and of its condition. You come up with an initial retrofit strategy, maybe informed by a bit of energy modelling. You have some shortlisted wall insulation options, generally looking at external insulation in the first instance because there's lower technical risk. You can't often do it, so you then look at internal insulation. Carry out a decent moisture risk assessment, especially in more exposed areas. But I've done a lot of risk assessments in exposed and benign areas and found risks to vary depending on much more than just where you are in the country. That should lead you towards a more appropriate insulation strategy. You then carry out some detailed design. Make sure you sort out all the defects and get the building retrofit ready. That's a really good phrase to remember. Again, as with understanding, if your building is dry and sound and free from defects, anything you do to it is going to be lower technical risk. A lot of problems tend to crop up when people just bang in the insulation and cross their fingers and hope for the best, and they haven't sorted out the underlying fabric. When it's done, make sure that other relevant measures, particularly things like ventilation, are carried out and there's some decent oversight. Make sure ideally the occupants are engaged so they know what's going on, why it's being done the way it is, and what they need to do to look after it in the future, a lot of which will be effective maintenance. So I'm just going to jump out of that presentation and jump into another one, just to give you a quick case study. And I think this should be about 5 minutes, and then I'll maybe spend a couple more minutes at the end. This is a moisture risk assessment I did recently on a building in southwest Scotland. So traditional farmhouse and outbuildings. You've got thick stone walls, they've got a bit of cement render, lots of embedded timbers and lots of moisture related defects. It's going to be done up, including in retrofit measures. It's pretty high up and exposed. There's not much shelter. There it is, if you can see the dot on the map on the right. So I was asked to look at two main assemblies using Woofy, this tool, which will mean something to some of you and nothing to others of you. We can talk about it in the discussion afterwards if anyone's inclined. This is what the architect suggested. Thick layer of impermeable foil-faced foam board with a bit of plasterboard. And the client is more interested in an approach that's more in line with traditional building guidance. So a bit of lime plaster, a bit of wood fibre and a bit more lime plaster. And he also asked us to look at two different types of wood fibre. So rigid wood fibre finished in lime plaster, and then flexible wood fibre between timber battens and finished with a service void. He's going to take the render off, or proposing taking the render off, and maybe finishing it in lime wash, maybe just leaving it as exposed stone. We had some material testing carried out to inform the assessments, which is really important. In this case, we got the client to take some samples and send them to the third-party consultants who we use for that service, which is Green Gauge, of whom Paul is on the line, I think. Hi, Paul. The kind of things that jump out to me before I even start the assessments in terms of possible risk factors are general things like the level of exposure, the fact the masonry is not going to be covered by lime render or even cement render, the fact there are a lot of defects, and the fact there's an unknown heating and ventilation strategy. And for the first assembly, the foil-faced PIR, there's a very demanding U value target. It is impermeable. The insulation materials can't handle water apart from blocking it off. There's potential for air leakage. There's no parge coat. It's not in line with good practice guidance. So I wouldn't expect that to show good risk profiles. These are your predicted thermal performance parameters. So this is your U value. The lower the U value, the better the thermal performance, just in case anyone's not aware. So it looks pretty poor with no insulation on, although in reality, if you look at in situ monitoring of solid stone walls, the baseline U value is probably half that. It's probably 1.2, 1.3, maybe 1.4. These values here are more in line with good practice guidance, suggesting just easing off a bit. If you put more insulation on the walls, the U value gets better. And over here with the PIR, you've got a very low U value, which is known to increase technical risk, especially if you don't do it properly. So key findings, there are a load of graphs, which I'm not going to show you because they're not very user-friendly, but I'll buzz through them afterwards. Assembly 1 shows you very high risk profiles, even under good conditions. high moisture content in the masonry and insulation, which gets higher over time, well above indicative risk thresholds for timber rot and mould, and a limited drying ability over time at the back of the insulation. The assembly with 60mm wood fibre shows much lower risks, but still not risk-free. If you use rigid wood fibre, you have far lower water content in the insulation material than if you use flexible wood fibre. And if you use a bit less insulation, that shows you the lowest risk profiles, but still not bomb-proof. Well, not that any insulation on the inside of a solid wall is bomb-proof. If you cover the walls in lime render, an appropriate lime render mix, that shows the best option. So 40mm wood fibre with an external lime render, according to the pretty detailed moisture risk assessment, that's your best option for that building. Yeah, I don't have time to go through these, but if you've got lines going upwards, these are moisture profiles at different points in the assembly. Moisture content going up over time, this is 10 years in this case, is generally a bad thing. And you can see as you go through better assemblies, those moisture profiles drop. And this is your indicative timber rot risk threshold, this dotted line. So 40mm wood fibre and lime render looks pretty good under good conditions. You can also carry out stress tests to see what happens if you get rainwater leakage behind render, or what if you've got a defective ventilation system or an inadequate ventilation system. And again, those sort of things often flag up risks. So it's a good sense check of how your wall's likely to cope with typical defects. Yeah, what else is worth saying? There's the materials testing, these samples which were sent off to Green Gauge. Only other thing I wanted to touch on is that there is a BBA certificate for the PIR system. And it's worth just having a quick look at that before I stop talking. If you look at the section that deals with condensation risk, this is 6 years old. It refers to BS 5250 is that British standards document on moisture management that I showed you at the beginning and said you should have a copy of. That is a version which is well out of date and has some incorrect things in it. It refers you to BRE Guide 262, which has been withdrawn this year, and the section on internal wall insulation is not in line in any way with good practice guidance for traditional buildings. This is just highlighting the very high vapor resistivity that the foil back PIR will have. This section is saying if you use this outdated version of BS 5250 to do a risk assessment and it flags up a risk, you should do a WFI assessment. Whereas now the guidance will say you should do a WFI assessment anyway. And this is highlighting that you're going to have a good air tightness layer with that very, very big caveat of all joints being sealed, both now and in the future. So having a certificate doesn't necessarily mean it's bomb-proof. And I'm just going to jump back in for another minute or so to the other presentation and just finish up. I come back to this most important quote: do you understand what you're doing? If you do, crack on, and if you don't, just stop and think or do some reading. I don't have time to go through that. This is the email from that started this whole thing off, an email from an installer under the Great British Insulation Scheme, which suggested what I would regard as very inappropriate internal insulation approach. 1 minute left. 1 minute left, fine, thank you. I'm not going to go through this quote, but I would really recommend you read it. This is from it's probably 7 or 8 years old now, but it's a really good sort of potted summary of technical risks around internal insulation. And every word, I know there's a lot of words there, but every word in there is bang on. And it's a really good one to read in terms of understanding. There's lots of guidance around. I particularly like this one, which it covers all areas of building, not just walls, but it's got a lot of really good user-friendly diagrams. I'm sure some of you will have come across it already. And I've tried to just pick out a few things which it will be useful for you to read, although there are literally hundreds of resources, but these are both good case study resources, very recent publications looking at retrofit projects that have been monitored over time, this standard, a lot of technical guidance, and then some research. And that is quite enough from me. So I'm just going to stop sharing. And I hope that was vaguely intelligible.
Thanks, Nick. That's brilliant. And we're okay to share your presentation with all those links too, so people can digest that.
Yep, I'll send it on.
Obviously, that was a little bit whistle stop for you.
I know, sorry.
But I will make sure that we share that so people can digest it and have a look at all the awesome links you put on there. Have we got any questions?
Got one from Adam.
Hi.
It's a bit of a rhetorical question, but any others, please post them. Ooh, very
why are we getting qualified architects in this day and age suggesting 110 millimeters of PIR? Oh God.
Yeah, you still see it. You still see it. And well, Lucy knows all about that. Yes, and it's not appropriate. David, any thoughts on decrement delay? Yes, it's another one of the benefits of natural materials. They tend to be denser than your lightweight foam-based boards, and it can really help mitigate against overheating, especially in a sort of room in roof scenario. If you're doing an attic conversion, you're lightweight. There's lots of stats and modeling around showing that you get much lower temperatures inside and a lot more protection if you use things like wood fiber or sheet wool or cellulose compared with foam boards, basically. Anything else? Adam, which option did the client go with? I think the wood fiber there was quite a recent assessment, so I'm not entirely sure, but I was intrigued by the fact that the architect, who's meant to be the one who knows what he's doing, suggested an approach which even just an average householder thought that's not right. So I suspect it'll be 40mm wood fiber, hopefully with some lime render. The more and more moisture risk assessment I do, but also technical guidance you see, is highlighting that for traditional buildings, if you can cover them, not necessarily with a water repellent cream, but with an appropriate lime render or maybe even a lime wash, you get a lot more protection and lower moisture profiles. Tom, to use diathanite plaster as an airtight layer, yeah, it's really good. And you see the people who distribute it, Ecological Building Systems, they're trying to push a sort of combined approach now where you have a bit of diathanite and then a bit of wood fiber. There's blurb on their website about it. It's not a silver bullet, and I have seen problems with diathanite, but it ticks a lot of boxes on the right building if it's done properly. Okay.
Brilliant. Someone else in a minute. Thanks so much, Nick. That was brilliant. Lots to kind of, wow, lots to take in. I think we will, as I said, we will be recording this. So if you want to go back over it, which I probably will need to, that's great. We're going to move on now to Andy Pickup.
Good evening, everybody.
TimberTight.
How you doing? So I'm Andy Pickup, the technical director at a timber frame company. So it's all new build timber frame. I think I may also turn my video off as well, if you don't mind. So
Andy,
yeah,
if you can keep your video on, that would be helpful, just because I can't spotlight anyone otherwise. So
yeah, sure.
Oh, seems to be allowing it. That's fine. Carry on.
Okay. So for us in timber frame, we've been doing timber frame for a lot of years, and our company was set up around 7 years ago, and we mainly did open panel timber frame structures, and the installation and everything was put in on site by others. But over the last few years, we've developed knowledge and know-how to produce U values, psi values. We've got our own ability to create thermal bridging calculations. And 3 years ago, we were approached by one of our main clients to provide a Passivhaus timber frame system for a project in Halton, for Mill, I think it's for Lancashire or South Lakes Housing Association. And we started thinking about what systems were suitable. I'm sure most of you will have seen there's I-joist wall systems, which are actually floor joisted up, and Larson truss, which are separated frames by patrices. And for our manufacturing systems, they're all too complicated. So we've developed our own system, which is based on our standard timber frame, but a twin wall with offset timbers to reduce or eliminate thermal bridging. We do this around structural openings, so we've got good thermal bridging adjoining to window details. The standard frame without anything else can achieve around 0.14 as a U value, but then we can add to this wall build-up where required for Passivhaus requirements for each project, and we can get down to possibly 0.1 depending on the complexity of the building and the form factors. The main considerations for us are the air tightness, the services that are going through the structure, and our system, we wanted something that was, as previously been mentioned, vapor permeable. So we've got a thermocell board on the outside, which replaces what's commonly used in timber frame, which is like an oriented strand board. And we're also insulating these frames with a non-combustible mineral wool. This is the system that was used in the Driglington project, which I'm sure a few of you may be aware of. And we're still in development with this project, and we've learned an awful lot on that job. But we're finished on that site now, but the site continues. I think they've got an open day or two coming up soon. So in terms of air tightness, flat surfaces internally, straightforward, easy. Where we find complexity in air tightness is at structural junctions. So we've actually started to redesign junctions between internal walls and external walls around floor zones, so that we can achieve the incredibly tight requirements on Passivhaus. And these are some of our details. I don't know if you can see, there's a detail on the left with a cutout of the internal wall, and you can see the picture on the right, which shows that in practice on site. So during construction, we're putting membrane stripping that can then be joined at a later date. And the reason for the gap is that we want to tape those membranes when the building's got the roof on and the windows on and it's dry. We've settled on two products really that we'd like to use all the time for air tightness, and that's an air tightness OSB board, SmartPly Pro Passive, and a Tescon Vanna tape. There's plenty of other products out there, but those are the ones that we found are the best for our purposes, at least for off-site construction.
1 minute left, Andy.
So this is again from the Driglington site, and it shows where we finish, which is the first air test before any of the services go in. We test the building we work with the window suppliers who install the windows, then we tape the windows, and we find that that's what contractors are requiring now, is that we provide the full airtight structural shell that's fully insulated. Another key consideration, we get the M&E layouts and the service layouts, and we design and engineer joists so that pipes and MVHR ducts can pass through. We do a lot of other systems as well for Passivhaus, where we haven't got as much space for external walls. This is an ongoing project at Parkmount Road in Manchester, and we just started on site with this system. I think I could probably spend another hour talking about all that, but that's as much as I can manage in 5 minutes. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, that's really interesting. We've got a lot of questions. I know you have to leave, so we may have to pass on some questions and at a later time, I think.
Yeah,
we're going to have
happy to answer anything over email.
Okay, that's great. Okay, we'll save the chat. If we don't get through all your questions today, we'll save the chat. And next we've got Camilla Govan from People Powered Retrofit.
Hi there, can you hear me? Yes?
Yeah, we can
Great.
hear you.
Okay, hi everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to go for this 5 minutes. So I'm Camilla Govan. I'm a Passivhaus consultant. I work for People Powered Retrofit as a retrofit design consultant. We're a small organisation based in Manchester that came out of, we're not for profit, we came out of the Carbon Co-op, and we're working with, the idea is to help householders, to ordinary houses, get on and do retrofit, and particularly I think where they don't think they might need an architect involved, where it's sort of smaller activities where they could just go and get a local builder, but they're not sure what they get. So, you know, lovely hearing Nick talking about all his stuff. That's very much where we come from, is trying to help people to manage that risk. What do we do? We've got our main, I suppose what we come out of is our retrofit surveys are sort of bread and butter. We've got a piece of software called the Home Retrofit Planner, which is based on the sort of back end of SAP, but it's also very much aligned to PHPP. And we have a process where we talk to the householder about what their objectives are, what they're wanting to achieve. Is it, you know, do they want a heat pump and really heat pump ready, or are they looking to do a sort of major retrofit of the whole house and have a sort of really comfortable low carbon house, and what's their budget and all that sort of thing. Then we have a survey and produce a report, and the report has different options, sort of quick wins, what they've talked about they want to achieve, but also a full job, and then we talk through what they want to do next and how to approach that. So the next thing we do is we may leave them, they may say, right, we're going to go off to our builder now, we've decided what we're going to do. But we also have a service to support clients to deliver what they've decided to do. And we're mainly focusing on a sort of standard specification approach, where we help their builder to talk through what they're going to do. And it's quite these are detailed specifications. They talk a lot about risk, about building regs and all that sort of thing. But along with that, you have support from potentially me for the builder and for the client to help through that process. But we're not actually involved in delivery, but we're supporting delivery. This is a sort of relatively new service, and we're developing it. But I think we see it as an important part. And we also signpost people to architects where we think it's sort of more of a complicated or difficult job or a bigger job, and it's not going to suit that approach. And then the other thing we do, and some of you will know, we work across the country and obviously in Yorkshire too, doing partnership activities. So partly this is looking at this Home Retrofit Planner, and some organisations like maybe in York that they might be using our software under license and with support from us. But we also do a lot of work with other organisations. We definitely don't want to work all the way across the country. We aim to be local and be a one-stop shop for the Manchester area. So just thinking about where we work, up until now, we've mainly focused on the dark areas, so around Manchester up to Bolton and down.
1 minute left, Camilla.
Okay, But we've agreed we're going to, with me and my colleague Sophia, who's also on this call, she's based in Hebden Bridge, I'm in Slathwaite near Huddersfield, that we're going to also operate more actively in this area. Hence, I was asked today to do this. So what do? We take a whole house approach, as lovely Nick's stuff on the defects and ventilation, moisture, air tightness. It's all about the whole picture, making sure it works together. And finally, I think that's about it. If you come to our website, it's not the best. If you look for the 3 little lines, you'll find more information on how to link to us. We don't normally, it's not so easy to call us, but if you fill the form on the website, then you get a call from my colleague Harriet, who will talk through the process. And equally, if it's a partnership activity, then my colleague Monica is the person who will call you, and she will work to find appropriate support. We're very interested in supporting activity nationally. That's quite a big part of our work, as well as working locally. But in terms of today, it's about the local service, which is part of what I'm about. Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Camilla.
I'm sure I've missed half what I planned, but there you are. That's it.
Yeah, we understand it's such a whistle stop kind of thing to put into 5 minutes, but we will be sending out a follow-up email with the details of every speaker, so you can go and check out their websites and their information as well. So we do understand it's a lot to take in. Okay, we're moving on to Michael Gratian.
Thank you very much. 1 second, let's share the screen. Good evening, everybody. I'm Michael from Five Rise Contractors. We are a principal contractor working in the commercial and domestic passive house and retrofit projects around the region, and even right up to the top of Cumbria. Now, I was asked to look at lessons learned from our passive house. Now, I could literally talk for hours and hours and hours on what we've done with this. So I've decided to focus on our operatives and training and having the right people doing the right job. So we are currently building the only passive house in the BD postcode, which I'm pleased to say that we've got the final air test certificate for it passed. So well done us. And when we started doing this project, we looked at our team and decided, who do we think can cope with the extra things needed around passive house, because a lot of these apprentice trained adults have never ever discussed anything to do with passive house or retrofit. And in building, we've always had the attitude, well, I've always done it that way, so why would I change? So this is the start of our passive house project, and some of the things that we've been looking at, we thought we were going to get some all singing, all dancing things by some subcontractors, and we looked at it and thought we could deliver this, and we decided to fully train nearly all our operatives up, actually with the help of Adam Harper, who's on here now, offering some free training in the York area to really get the passive house principles into our operatives. They all know about high levels of insulation and the windows and air tightness, but the actual doing of it is very different, even down to silly things on site, like the air tape, the air tightness tape. So you can see some of our joints there. For the electrical grommets, you try explain to an electrician who's 55 years old, who's been doing electrics for 40 years of that he now can't drill through a wall and through the insulation to put cables in. And by the way, you've got to put them in rubber grommets. And when you put the rubber grommets on, you've got to drill every cable out individually. So yeah, I'm going to say it didn't go well, the first electrician. It didn't last too long. However, we've now settled on a team that really embraced it. And the new things that we're discovering, no, not discovering, but the new things that we're training people up on, they've really embraced it. And the air tightness, we've had a lot of help from Partel, doing lots of courses for us and things like that. Down to detailings that you can see there on the windows. We've we had an issue with this, and our subcontractor who built the timber frame, that when that window frame there is plastered up, you can still see the tape. Now, I don't know how much use you've had of air tightness tape. It does not come off easy. So we had 2 days scraping that tape off. And this is all about having the skills and the knowledge to know that that was, we've lost so much time on this job because of silly things like that. And on the window details that you can see there, we've had a very senior foreman that we've parted ways with now. Very good joiner foreman on all our traditional builds. But as you can see there, and we actually had Phil Bixby's on the call today, come with his infrared camera to do a little bit of snagging with us. We found that he hasn't put the insulation on the outside of the windows. It's not the end of the world because we can take the cladding off and do it that way. But all these things that we've learned have come from this one job. Also, what the operatives have been telling me on site, they've absolutely loved doing the professional development side of it. It's things I've never done before. Everyone's embracing it. They like the fact that there's a better quality control in things like this. They like the fact that they're involved with innovative projects, to be fair. And some of the operatives that are on site are involved in site meetings, actually have the confidence to speak to these architects. I know it was mentioned earlier that not all the architects seem to know the best outcome for everything, and we get told to do something, but our operatives now are having the confidence to speak up and say, I'm not sure this is right. I know I've got the pictures up here of a passive house, but we're also doing some deep retrofits. And one of our lads just stood back and says, I'm not sure this is the right way. Have we thought about this? I've never seen that before in any of our operatives, to a point where they've actually pushed back against the architect because of the training that they've done. And we're trying to push all this to avoid the common mistakes. I will not begin to tell you how many common mistakes we actually carried out on this job and the deep retrofits that we're doing. However, the learnings we've got from it, of the lessons learned, has pushed us so far on the journey now that we've got the confidence. Now we've opened, as you can see there, we opened it up at an AECB open day. We're opening our deep retrofit in Huddersfield up, so that'll be going around. Any members of the AECB, thank you, any members of the AECB can come and see. I know Adam's working with Chris, our business development director, to get that one off in February, I think. And anybody who's unsure, or any builders out there that you speak to who are not sure about doing this and think, oh, what is the point, what's the hassle, please get them to come and speak to me, because it is such a good process to be involved with. And there's so much work out there. We're not stupid. I know doing events like this and doing events like the AECB are good for business. However, we've got a real passion for this. We've even changed, we're changing to B Corp because of all this now, because we're trying to be a force for good. We're only now taking projects on that will either have a positive outcome or be a force for good in the world. That's how much we've changed our business model to push the passive house and the deep retrofit as far as we can, alongside the training. And there's so much free training out there as well. And the training's really good by the manufacturers, better than any sort of traditional build stuff. So yeah, that's us. That's 5 minutes of short-term stuff. So anybody wants to speak to me, give us a ring.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. Adam, actually, you've just spoken about. Adam, you're up next.
Hi everyone, have I got sound?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I'm just going to share a couple of things. Can you see that? Oh, sure, that's shared. Ah, there we go. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, I can see that.
Brilliant. Hello everyone. I'm Adam. I'm a trustee of the AECB, but I also coordinate the local group in Yorkshire. So probably half of you, I'd say, on this call might be in the AECB or be associated with it. We're as it says there, the largest and longest running network for sustainable building in the UK. We were set up in the 80s, and we're very much like a sort of member organisation. We exist for members to share knowledge, to promote best practice, to be a network. I think Michael's demonstrated that, you know, really well, the power of actually you know, sharing your learnings, and that's what we're really all about in the AECB. Our members are very wide range of people. So we've got contractors, architects, engineers, consultants, people who are doing self-build. We even just have interested kind of individuals, environmentalists. So if that sounds up your street, then do have a look at our website. This is the new one actually, so not everyone will have seen this. It's just gone live today. Oh, thanks, Chailey. On a Yorkshire level, in the past sort of couple of years, I've been trying to get in-person events going. Things got a bit quiet during COVID. So this is the sort of thing we get up to. We get to go to some really interesting projects, and we're very grateful that our members often open their projects up. We've been to some really great Passivhaus projects in the last couple of years, including the one that Michael's doing in Bradford. We've been to some interesting ones down in Huddersfield. We've been to an amazing retrofit of a farmhouse that Niche Design Architects did. I think Chris might be on the call. And then the most recent one, last month, we went to visit this engineered timber factory down in Barnsley, and they very kindly opened their doors up to us. Some of you on the call are in this photo. But that's the cool kind of stuff we get up to. And in 2025, we've got a site visit lined up to go and see Wrapped Homes' latest project in York. They're doing a whole house retrofit on it's actually a Victorian council home, but they're going internal wall insulation and MVHR, doing a very deep retrofit. We're going to go and see the project that Michael's got in Huddersfield, which looks amazing. They've totally gutted this bungalow in a conservation area, doing a whole house retrofit. So we're looking forward to seeing that. And then I'm also hoping to arrange a visit to the York Heritage Skills Training Centre, which is part of the York Minster. They've just retrofitted a historic building that hosts their Heritage Skills Centre, which is where their stonemasons and the people that do historic conservation work are based. There's one other thing I just wanted to mention that Michael touched on. In my day job, I work for City of York Council, and we're actually got some funding available for building professionals who work in York or who live in York to undertake Passivhaus training. We're able to fund courses like the Certified Passivhaus Tradesperson and the Passivhaus Bite-Size course. So I'll put my email in the chat. Basically, you just have to be either actively working on projects in York or based in York to qualify, because it's unfortunately just the York area, because the funding's from the council. Okay, I'll finish there. Thanks.
Wow. That's very, very, very succinct. Thanks, Adam. I'm going to pass on to John now. John Kerr.
Right, get that. Hello, everyone. Let's try and get this up. Okay, right. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay? Are you there? Everybody can see that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, my name's John Kerr. I'm the Training and Networks Manager for Zero Carbon Yorkshire. Zero Carbon, sorry, not Zero Carbon Yorkshire, Zero Carbon Harrogate. It pretty much tells you what we're about in terms of advocacy, transport, buildings, anything to reduce, get down to net zero. The bit that I'm here to talk to you about tonight is about the retrofit programme. We've been running a programme since June 22, and the bit that we're currently involved in is a local energy advice demonstrator in partnership with North Yorkshire Council and Aligned Property Partners and Climate Action for which is Stokesley and surrounding villages. So without further ado, the objectives of LEAD are to prove concept of retrofit for one-stop shop model in North Yorkshire. And both from the council's perspective and from Zero Carbon Harrogate's perspective, we're looking at how that might roll out. And this programme is to try and improve that, understand the archetypes, understand the attitudes of homeowners within the county. A big part of it, and the bit that I'm involved in and delivering, is developing a retrofit economy through skill development and retrofit and renewables, and inform householders on energy efficiency measures through retrofit. So retrofit and renewables training, it's primarily directed towards the trades. So to upskill those already in the market and to develop that as quick as we possibly can, rather than going from grassroots, if you like. And in the importance of the courses that we're running are, for the most part, nationally accredited, to making sure that we get that kind of continuation in. And give us a rounded as possible retrofit economy skill base. So rather than in our previous program, what we looked at was kind of a limited area of training funding that we offered. What we've tried to do is to expand that out to try and give a more rounded retrofit economy. So for argument's sake, if we're looking at training air source heat pump engineers, we're not just training those, we're also looking for people that are skilled in F-gas, which is a qualification you need to actually deal with the gases within air source heat pumps. So it's trying to make that rounded economy rather than just delivering the first part of something. So this slide hopefully gives you some idea of the kinds of training in terms of retrofit and renewables. The renewables is probably the easy one, and this is air source heat pump installation, solar PV, solar thermal, energy storage, battery, house batteries, home EV. It goes beyond that, but they're the key ones, and we've got some flexibility around the funding in that particular area, depending on where we see the demand. And something which I've been talking about a lot recently is having that flexibility, which funding tends not to be that flexible, and we're funded through DESNZ. And we are kept to very strict KPIs. But what we've seen even in the last years, as the retrofit economy is changing, the more we understand about how to retrofit different types of houses, archetypes, that changes. So we have some flexibility around that. The builder installer side is a lot harder, and I think Michael's has touched on that, to say the least. And it's really hard. We've found it very, very difficult to engage with a lot of builder installers. And originally we set out looking at delivering traditional training, so more formal classroom based. It didn't work. So what we've managed to do is to go into partnership with Partel, and they've kindly worked with us, and it's been absolutely brilliant, and delivering workshops, so half-day workshops out there. So we're going out. We've done 3 locations within North Yorkshire: Hutton, Rugby, Rickle and Harrogate, and it's been a huge success of engagement with builders that are really starting to kind of, I think, I wouldn't say wake up, but being persuaded, and looking at what's actually happening within the market. The other side of this is what I call retrofit professionals, in the sense that they tend to be roles that are very specific to retrofit. And again, we've learned, originally we had funding for just retrofit assessor, but we found that there wasn't that many domestic energy assessors, which is a pre-qualification to become a retrofit assessor out there. And on that basis, we've extended our funding to do both domestic energy and the retrofit assessor, and then retrofit coordinator, which was in our previous campaign and is in this one. These are delivered through the Retrofit Academy, and possibly Elmhurst. We have like some contractual issues at the moment, but Retrofit Academy have been doing the lion's share of this. Again, showing kind of flexibility. We don't have a KPI for retrofit designer, but it is an area that has come up recently. We've seen a demand, especially within architects.
So 1 minute, John.
And as such, so we managed to scrape some funding away from something else, to be able to fund 10 places for that. So it's showing we're trying to get some flexibility as the market moves on. 2 very, very, very quick things. With the help of Diane Hubbard, we did a heat party. I've been talking to Diane for quite some time now, and basically what we're trying to do is demonstrate to householders kind of what's actually going on in their house. And you can talk till till it's dark about it, but until you actually show them exactly what's happening, and that's what we did with the heat party. So we essentially used a blower door. We created negative pressure in this particular house in the photo, and we had residents who live in this kind of house experience what a gale was coming through that house, and essentially what are the quick fixes in terms of starting to tackle that, but for them to understand how much heat they're actually losing out of their house. And from that, we delivered last week Home Energy Retrofit Fair, our very, very first. It was, I do say to myself, a huge success. We had over, we had 70, I think it was 78 people signed up for it. 65 attended. We had 8 retrofit experts who are listed down there. Thank you very much. If any of you, I know Steve's on the call at the moment. It was just amazing to see the response we got from the public. They're out there, they want to do something, and it's all about, and this applies from both sides, is confidence. It's confidence from the trades, and it's confidence from the householder. And that, I believe, last Thursday night, it was Baltic outside, but we got those people that came along, they asked questions, and that's what it was all about. Right, okay.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much for listening. My details are on if anybody wants to contact me.
Brilliant. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
So we've got Tom Taylor.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I feel like I've gate crashed someone's party, maybe a heat party here. But so I'm not from a technical background. I'm here to tell you about a community project it's called Energy Neighbours. And it's about working with communities in fuel poverty, and I'll tell you a bit about that. So we've got national lottery funding, but that money's not for all the technical stuff that you lot do. It's for working with community organisations and residents. It's got a training element, it's got an engagement bit. It's about building the capacity of those communities to start to take action on energy, however they want to do it. So part of the thinking here is that this is not climate change. It's not just a technical problem. It's not just a political problem or an economic one. It's a problem of power and our relationships and our ability to be an agent ourselves in it. So many people feel powerless around this agenda. So Energy Neighbours grew out of a piece of work with community buildings. So my real fear when the energy prices went up was that we'd just lose all our community buildings because they run on a shoestring, and there were stories of people having 400% increase in their energy costs. So I did a piece of work, and I reckon there's 300 community buildings in Kirklees, and they're spending about £3.5 million a year on energy. So if we can start to plug that hole, that money can stay in communities and help deal with some of the difficulties and problems. And most of those community buildings are doing stuff to improve their energy efficiency, but they're really struggling to get the right advice, to get contractors who turn up, to get quotes, to get the funding, to get money for the fabric of the building, as well as fancy glitzy things like solar panels or heat pumps. So that's the real challenge for our community buildings. And there are thousands and thousands of people who rely on those buildings for their support. So, and they also told me in that piece of research that their communities were really struggling, and the fuel poverty exacerbates all the other inequalities in our communities. So I'm going to share you this little slide and just explain what the project actually does. I don't know if this will work, by the way, but we'll try it. Share. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's great.
So it's a project by TSL Kirklees, one of the abbreviations in this, the acronyms in this meeting that I did understand, which is Third Sector Leaders Kirklees. It's the umbrella body for all the non-profits. And some of the core of this project is to build a network of community organisations COMIT stands for Community Organisations Making the Energy Transition. So any of those who are doing anything on energy can be there, and the idea is that they support each other to get things done. And every year we're going to have an annual conference, and we're just going to share learning from the project. We're going to train volunteers and groups to start to think about what they might do about energy. And that could be anything at all. Let me just, I've tried to do something fancy here, but it's not worked on my. Oh yeah, here we go. So there'll be a project team, there'll be 7 staff, and we're currently recruiting for a project manager, a data manager and a coordinator. So the 3 posts that hold it together. And then in the 4 communities with the highest level of fuel poverty in Kirklees, in Batley, Heckman, White, Dewsbury and Huddersfield, there'll be a community energy development worker to work with those communities. We've got a partnership with the Climate Commission who are going to help us keep our focus on climate impact and help share the learning from the project. And the idea is that we try and reach people who don't often get involved in this stuff, but who are affected by just the cost of energy. And holding it all together is the How's It Going Forum. This project has at its heart the idea that we can make decisions together, and we can do this not just treating people as consumers, but treating them as active agents and partners in this project. So the quarterly forum will look at how the project is progressing and involve the communities in decisions about how the money's spent and what the workers do. So we're going to start by just listening and connecting with the community organisations and the residents there, and start from wherever they are. If their priority is health and they're worried about mould and all those things in the house, then that's a way in to start talking about energy. Most of them are not saying we really want to do something about climate change. They don't fly all over the world and have big cars and change their gadgets every week. So
1 minute left, Tom.
Wow, okay. So we need to evidence impact. So there's going to be a whole data part to it and some independent evaluators. We want to have conversations about the future of energy in these communities, start to think about community energy projects, sustainable community buildings, green businesses, all that side of things. We're looking for learning and training partners and energy experts. So there will be a very small tender going out for energy experts. And that's my project. It's all very exciting. We'd really welcome links with more technical and practical folk to try and join up across communities and the businesses. So get in touch. I'll post the link in the chat.
Oh, thanks, Tom. That's brilliant. That's actually quite chimed with me because my work is also community based, and I'm trying to do a similar thing through the Climate Action Leeds project in Leeds, working with community centres and community buildings that are struggling. So I will definitely have a conversation. Right. I think.
Yeah, look forward to
that'll be I'm just going to take 2 minutes to tell you about a little bit of the work that Climate Action Leeds has been doing before we take questions. So yeah, I'm the housing and energy partner for Climate Action Leeds and work for People Powered Homes. So my focus is not technical. It's kind of a supporting, connecting, enabling, amplifying kind of role, which I think is similar to Tom. And I've been running, as part of that, we've been running retrofit events. We're going to be running some in-person events in the new year, probably in February in Leeds, just to kind of try and keep up these conversations and try and keep these networks going. So I'm going to be trying to focus on creating bigger networks and getting people together in the same space a bit more often. So look out for that. I will be sending out information about that. I'm also developing Leeds Community Energy, which is, again, looking at community energy projects within Leeds and how we support those to go forward. And I know there's a lot of people involved with that on the call as well. But I will leave it there because I think we've probably got plenty of questions. I don't know if you've picked some up, Chailey, or I've picked up some of them.
I have. I've been going through, everyone's been very good at responding to them, but I did think there was some, just coming back to Nick's talk, actually. I don't know if we want all the speakers, shall I spotlight?
Yeah.
See if I can do that. Hold on a sec.
I can read out one question while you're spotlighting people.
Please do.
Okay. So there was a question for Michael, and to ask whether you were sharing and learning with other contractors and subcontractors.
Is that from Adam? That's an Adam question.
I think so, yes.
Yes, we are. We're actually having lessons learned sessions after the projects. They are getting less and less, which is good. But yeah, we try and share where we can, and also push the subcontractors to do some of the training where we can as well. So yeah, we are. I know buildings notoriously, we know this and we're not going to share it. Whereas the passive world and thing is a little bit more open. We just need to open it more because there's a lot to learn. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Oh, there's some quite technical ones. I'm going to pass over to Chailey if you've got a question.
Oh, yeah, well, there was one, Nick did answer it in the chat, but I just thought it was a really good question because obviously Leeds, your house, Lucy, in Leeds was the start of all this. So there was a question about, would a typical house in Leeds, are these still the issues, the internal wall insulation, would that still be a problem? Not just a traditional, really old building, but like a terrace or something?
Yeah. I mean, I put a little bit of chat in the chat answering that question, but they don't have to be special or listed to be technically complex. I don't know if it's, can I share my screen for one?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it might be useful if, I know, Lucy, I did ask if I could share this email, which, oh God, I just need to find it. There we go. So this is the email you got back from the potential installers under the Great British Insulation Scheme. And this is problematic for me because this is the sort of stuff I've been seeing for years, and standards keep improving and guidance keep improving, and you got PAS 2035 and etc. But for the average householder who's not, massively interested in this weird moisture stuff, I don't know how they know where to turn. I mean, if you read through this, when you asked why they were proposing phenolic foam, which for anyone who doesn't know is impermeable, very high thermal performance, but it can't manage moisture at all. They have said it was selected based on its high thermal performance and compliance with PAS 2035 standards. PAS 2035 requires a moisture safe design, so it's not compliant in my view. They seem to be thinking that trickle vents are going to manage all of the moisture issues in the whole building and in the building fabric. Blah, blah, blah. What else does it say? They're saying the use of phenolic is non-negotiable. So you still have funding schemes where householders are offered one material, and that's it, which, given that 20-25% of our buildings are older and need a different approach, is a non-starter really for large-scale robust retrofit. Where they say we understand that trickle vents primarily manage internal moisture loads, they should really be saying we don't understand ventilation. Our approach ensures that proper ventilation and condensation control measures are in place. We assess all moisture risks carefully, but if they do, they're clearly using the wrong metrics, the wrong assessment method. So that, there are plenty of risks around, unfortunately, for lots of different building types, not just the posh stuff.
Okay, I've got a training question, maybe for John. John, if that's okay. So it's a bit of a hard one to answer, but it was how long will it take for architects and workforce to upskill to what's needed? Sorry, that's a horrible question, but yeah.
Gosh, I don't think there's ever going to be an end to it. Just as I've discovered over the last 3 years of being involved in retrofit, is we're constantly kind of, things are changing, our understanding of how to do things into certain types of buildings, etc. And as new products come online, but I think I would hope certainly in the next 3 years that we would start to see something more formal in terms of training for architects, surveyors, and everyone else that's involved in that supply chain in terms of retrofit, and become more formalized so that we kind of separate that out. I've seen there's a lot to talk about accountability, and in terms of how accountable architects are and everybody else, again, involved in that supply chain. I think that's a good thing, and hopefully that will again drive further more training. Probably a fudge answer, but yeah, there's so much we don't know even now. So watch this space. I guess we'll just keep driving on.
There's a question for Nick. Oh, this is a long one. Would you say current government funding aligns with a whole house approach? I've been advised that many sympathetic IWI materials for solid walls won't get past 2035 compliance. Is this correct?
Okay. Hi, Amy. Current government funding, not yet. It's getting better. It is getting better. Many sympathetic, yes. So there's a real issue with natural materials or materials appropriate for traditional building fabric in terms of warranties and guarantees. There is one wood fibre IWI system called Warm Shell, which I think is distributed by Lime Green down southwest. And they've got some knowledgeable people there. That has a BBA certificate, or the equivalent. It's got Agrement certification. There is one material called Inditherm, which is a Scottish hemp insulation, and that has BBA certification, I think, for use in timber frame and in roofs, not necessarily as IWI. Where there are space constraints, is improving airtightness less? Yeah, I mean, improving airtightness has to go alongside IWI anyway. But yes, you can get significant benefits with improving airtightness. But again, it's not a standalone approach, because you need to understand what you might do to moisture management, and you need to have decent ventilation strategy in place. So you need both ideally. Cork sole, yeah, I've come across it. Adam's already answered it. I can talk to you more about it off grid, maybe. Yeah.
What about a SWIP system?
Oh, well, so I did a moisture risk assessment recently on a big building down in Gloucester, I think, where they were proposing a mineral fibre system with a ventilated cavity between the brick. This is a big warehouse conversion, a ventilated cavity between that and the insulation. And according to the modelling, the WUFI analysis, it'll work if there's enough ventilation in the cavity. And this is something I find on a lot of projects where people are proposing a cavity, is that the moisture risk is really highly dependent on the ventilation rate in the cavity. They then approached me saying they wanted to change it to a SWIP system, which looks good in a lot of respects. But there are challenges on some buildings for it. It's not, again, I've heard more about it relatively recently. It's definitely coming on, but I suppose, as with all this stuff, there's no silver bullet. It has its pros and cons, and really, it's very difficult to say this system looks good, therefore it will work. Again, I've just done an assessment on a really good proposal with diathanite and wood fibre, and it's showing very high risk, not because of the insulation system, but because of the context of the building. So I can't really say any one system is brilliant or terrible, apart from general principles of what's brilliant or terrible.
There's a question for Camilla about does your organisation work in Leeds, or how far do you spread out to?
Yeah, we're not working in Leeds. I think we're thinking within an hour of our offices in East Manchester. I think Lucy, you might be able to. You probably know more about what's happening in Leeds. Pass to you.
Yeah, and we've looked quite into your model, because it's a fantastic model, and we're hoping to do some training in Leeds with people powered retrofit. As far as I know, there is no organisation that does what you do. There are smaller organisations that I know are on the call actually that do training people up in retrofit on the job, such as Canopy Housing. I think is David still on the chat, where you can actually learn about retrofit whilst retrofitting houses for the homeless, which is an awesome project. But the particular model that people powered retrofit does is something we would love to emulate in Leeds, but we're not there yet by any means. But it's definitely something that's on my radar, and something I'd look at going forward. So we'll keep in touch and let's make it happen.
Great. I feel like we're answering a lot of the questions. There's kind of quite a lot of technical things that might be maybe too much. Yeah. Can I just do a bit of a plug for Zero Carbon Yorkshire Buildings? Just that there's two kind of useful networking tools, really. One is a LinkedIn group that should be more active than it actually is, but there is a LinkedIn group which you can join, and I'll find a link and I'll put it in. There's also a Google group which is really helpful, and often you can share, question if you've got a question, and there's like the hive mind will answer it. So, which is when Lucy came up with, that's how this event happened really. So I will maybe, if I put my email in the chat, and if you wanted to be in the Google group, email me, that would be great. Okay.
And I can put a link to the LinkedIn group on the follow-up email. We'll make sure we get as much information out to you about everything we've talked about. I can't promise everything, but I'll get as much as we can out to you at the follow-up. And obviously there'll be a recording of this meeting as well. Do we have any final questions?
There is one for John that's just come in. Would your funding places extend to NYC building control? Is that council? Yeah. Would you get would you be able to train building control?
Yes, that would be fantastic. Definitely. Yes. Get in contact, please. I can put in the chat my email address anyway. So yes, we definitely would. So yes, please.
Can I just add, it would be great to get more planners and conservation officers and building control officers trained up on this stuff, because I've seen a number of really counterproductive responses from building control and planning to a degree, questioning materials and systems that are clearly more appropriate. And it just suggests there's not a full understanding between what it actually says in building regulations and what it says in good practice guidance and what you're meant to do.
We've got Jed. Jed's got a question. Do you want to just tell us the question? Yeah.
I was wondering if, can people hear me okay? I was wondering if you could speak, Lucy, about your experience with grants. I know you bought a house, you mentioned at the beginning, but you didn't go for the grant. I'm just legitimately curious why you didn't, basically.
Because of basically the stuff that Nick's just talked about, the only materials that were available through the schemes were completely inappropriate for my old house with no cavity walls. The stuff they wanted to put in, and that's kind of how this all started. I asked for advice, and I got a lot of it, and it's just it wasn't worth it for me to go ahead, because I would have been risking, all the bad things that people have talked about today. So I'm at the moment I'm back to square one with it. I don't really know where to. Well, I do, but the things that I would need to do are going to be very expensive. So I think I'd rather stay in the cold house and wear my woolly jumper than than risk. You know, there's a lot of risks that come with it as well, that, you know, people can't sell their houses, that the banks won't, if you've got certain materials in your walls, the banks won't touch you. So there's, you know, I suppose I'm worried, and this is only from my experience, I'm not targeting any companies at all, that you know, people who don't have the wealth of experts to bounce off are going to go and just go, yes, free insulation, brilliant, and then it's going to come back to bite them in a big way, and it's probably going to be a bigger problem than we know, you know, that we're going to think about later on. It's going to be a lot of people that are going to suffer with that. That's all. Obviously, speculation on my part.
If anyone wants to, there hasn't been as much internal insulation, but if anyone wants a kind of sobering reminder of what can go wrong with large-scale insulation schemes, just type Preston external wall insulation into Google, and it's not the only one, but it's bloody hell, it is appalling. And the poor people who live in the homes, they're knackered. Yeah, there's a load of good stuff. All these measures are really good if you do it properly, but you need to understand what can happen if you do it badly. So Lucy, I think you're absolutely right to just stop and think. You don't have to do it tomorrow. I mean, we need to do stuff, but if you do it quickly and get it wrong, then it serves no purpose.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for your advice on that. We've probably got time for one more question, do you think, Chailey? Before we're going to try and finish dead on time, not to take up any more of your evening. You probably want to get tea, but if there's anything else,
let's see. There's one from Tom Bailey. I didn't quite understand it. Tom, do you want to unmute yourself?
I think I wrote one down from Tom.
Yeah, there's just a new one that's come in about. Yeah, Tom, are you there? Tom Bailey.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. So I'm calling from Brussels. I'm a Passivhaus consultant here.
International. Excellent.
Yeah, I'm from Somerset originally. I have a question. I call it a permit system, but it's the municipality or the urban permits. You know, when you need to change the front facade on the street side. Over here in Brussels, we have lots of problems with the communes not really wanting to change the look and the vernacular. So you can walk around Brussels and most of the streets are terrace houses, and we live along one terrace street here, and no one really can get anything done. And we know with the whole house approach and retrofit, we've got to do things to scale. And how are we going to be able to influence the process at that permit level, where we can actually get them on side to allow permits to go through to change the houses according to the climate crisis that we're in? How will that happen?
Nick, do you want to have a go at that? Or Camilla, sorry, Camilla, yeah.
Nick can say, well, I mean, I think we're in Manchester area, we've been trying to work with the Great Basin Manchester Authority, getting them to look at sort of the idea of it's a bit like a pattern book idea, where you say that this, maybe Adam, you'll be much more direct, you work for a council, but to agree certain kinds of things are permitted development and make it easier. We've got a lot of trouble with different councils saying you can't do this, you can't do that, the heat pump or the render or whatever. Anyway, Adam, you sound like you've got.
Yeah, I would just say it is a massive challenge. Most local planning authorities have a very poor understanding of retrofit in particular, which I think Nick touched on. And the same goes for Passivhaus, although it's potentially easier in a new build context to give consent to a development than it is doing retrofit measures in the existing built environment. But training of planners, we have to keep chipping away at this. But I know for a number of people I've spoken to on this call that this is actually one of the biggest project challenges we face, is trying to get planners to understand why we're doing certain things.
Just to add to that, there are some isolated local authorities who are quite proactive. But across the UK, yeah, there's a long way to go, but it really needs to be addressed.
Do you think it will have to come from the government in the end and say that enough is enough, and we have to have the same, same hymn sheet, I suppose, across the board, so that we can speed things up? Do you think it will have to come from the top?
Possibly, but the danger with that is, it sounds like all my answers being negative. It's not intentional, but the danger with that approach is that you then get basically governments pushing out large scale retrofit, and it just doesn't work very well in general, because of the complexity of a lot of our building stock. It can be really good for certain property types, and you see foreign initiatives like Energiesprong that can be really good on the right house types, but there's no, I think it'd be very difficult for the government to mandate a very extreme sudden change, because it'll drive bad practice as well as good practice.
Wow, I think oh, sorry, Tom. Do we mind another couple of minutes, or are people desperate to go off? one more point, Tom. Go on. Tom?
I'd finish. You guys have answered all my questions, and great presentations. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Thanks to so much to all our speakers. It's very fast whistle stop, but really good to get like such different projects in the same room as well. And it wasn't all technical. We've got, community. It was really good to hear from you, Tom. And I'm definitely going to connect with you. Let's have a chat. And thanks to Chailey. Awesome technical.
Oh, finally, I'm getting the text. Great. We should wrap up, shouldn't we? But just if people found this valuable, because we've had a bit of a hiatus, but if people think this is useful for Yorkshire, like to do this maybe 3 times a year and just share what's happening, I think it's a useful networking thing, really. But please let us know, give us some feedback on that. So but should we wrap up? And okay,
and you should all have my email address, because I sent you the Zoom link, so do pass on any questions or anything to me. And thanks for coming.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks.
I'll close everything down now. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Lucy. Thanks,
Thank
Jay.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.